Excellent. So thank you for joining us to learn a little bit more about the A2F appeals process for incorrect data appeals. My name is Jessica Mueller. I'm the Research and Data Analyst for the Arizona State Board of Education. And I'm joined today by Sean Smith, the Chief Accountability Officer for the Arizona Department of Education.
Nope.
So to get us started, first we'll define what an incorrect data appeal is. Incorrect data appeals address any gaps or differences in the calculations from the school's demographics or performance. It can include information like students being misidentified for a subgroup, missing student assessment results, incorrect calculations in the summary of the A2F letter grade. In the process of correcting incorrect data, the Arizona State Board of Education typically expects for schools to use the static file validation period to first identify and then take the steps to try to rectify the data so it's accurate prior to the release of the letter grades. This is really to reduce the burden on schools to submit that A2F appeals application later on. However, of course, sometimes this is out of the school's control, and the data calculating the letter grade will reflect that incorrect information. The appeals process would then be the steps to correct this data, as well as maybe some additional steps to get the accurate data into the A2F summary tables for the future. Sean Smith, would you like to add any more information about what really helps the department about fixing the data prior to the letter grade release?
Yeah, this is a process that we appreciate tremendously, and we rely on collaboration and cooperation with the field. When we receive reports of incorrect data or there's inconsistencies, it helps us validate and audit our processes so we make sure we get it right for everybody. There's been many occasions where we've had a concern addressed or someone's brought something to our attention that then allowed us to fix a piece of code or a process or a system that benefited many other schools. So we welcome and appreciate the feedback that people send in to help us ensure that we've got correct and valid data.
Absolutely. And so, Sean, what is the best way for schools to let you know about an incorrect data issue during that static file validation period?
The best way, the promptest response is usually to email the Achieve inbox. That's achieve@az.gov. Our Achieve inbox staff is going to look into those. They're going to research those, and they'll bring those to the data analysts for review. And we want to reiterate, as Jessica mentioned, that sometimes there are things that are beyond the school's control. That July 15th static file validation window is a hard deadline in the sense of that is when our systems at the Department of Education transition to the new school year, and so they're no longer communicating with those data sets from student information systems. So we're going to rely on, there's some data that it's kind of locked and we're not able to change without a more detailed process. But when schools reach out for other systems and things like that are more under our control, we're able to make those changes and corrections. So again, just to reiterate the answer to your question, Jessica, if you can email the Achieve inbox at achieve@az.gov, we will look at all those considerations and concerns and conduct an investigation.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think it really helps to say that that deadline of July 15th, there could still be changes that happen on the department side to a school's letter grade up to that letter grade release that usually happens before November 1st or on November 1st of every year. So this is a little bit more information about what can be included in the appeal application that is submitted to the board, as well as any of those supporting documents that help the department and the board go to validate the incorrect data. SACE IDs can be included. This would be the student identification numbers, student names, any student diagnoses, or other personally identifiable information such as addresses, and anything that's protected by FERPA should be removed. And this is really because the anything that is submitted to the board in an appeal application is subject to that public records request. And so we're really trying to protect ourselves and protect you from any of that student information getting out into the public unintentionally. If any personally identifiable information is not removed, the appeal application will be destroyed and deleted. However, you'll be notified by board staff if we identify any of this information in the application or supporting documents. This usually goes through about anywhere from 6 to 8 different people's eyes. So there's a lot of people who are looking at the appeal application, supporting documents that would be able to identify it and get that message out to you. There can be some challenges if an appeal application is received on November 14th or 15th and getting this notification to school, this review done, and then the notification to schools. So it's really recommended that you try to submit that appeal application earlier in the appeals window from that November 1st to maybe November 12th or 13th date. The cutoff for that appeals window most often every year is 5 p.m. Mountain Time on November 15th. So how do the board and the Department of Education review the incorrect data appeals? This is a multi-step process where the board receives those appeal applications and they communicate to the department when it is an incorrect data appeal. So that is where the access to that appeal application is provided to the department to review and dig into any of the data, look through any of their communication records to see if the school has reached out and discussed that incorrect data prior to that letter grade release. ADE would identify if the incorrect data is substantiated or if more information is needed. And the board would request that additional information from the school. Sean, do you want to talk a little bit more about what you do when you receive that application and supporting documents?
Yeah, so our typical process, we have an excellent team of experts with accountability and data. We try and recreate the discrepancy that each school reports to us and trace that down to its root cause. And so sometimes that's going to be something as simple as, you know, in previous years, we've identified bugs in code. Sometimes it's going to be a process that lies deeper down in some of the source data that populates and is used to calculate accountability. But our shorthand approach is we're always going to take that, try and recreate what the individual is seeing, and then follow it down to figure out the cause and see where it's affecting possibly other people and see what we can do to fix it.
Absolutely, thank you. And then the step from there is to determine if that incorrect data does make an impact on the letter grade. The appeals committee is really there to evaluate changes in letter grade, not so much changes in points that don't account for any change in the letter grade if the appeal is approved. As it states here, again, the appeals where the letter grade would change are reviewed by the A to F Appeals Committee. ADE attends the A to F Appeals Committee meetings, might give a brief summary of their findings if the committee asks any questions. The school may or may not be asked to appear for a question and answer session. The board would be responsible for identifying those questions and providing them to schools, as well as all of the information to attend the A to F Appeals Committee, directions, timeline, things like that. Appeals where the letter grade would not change would not be brought before the A to F Appeals Committee. The appeal application is a non-substantive appeal, and that would be communicated to the school as well during that appeals window, or if it's received on the 14th or 15th, a little bit after that appeals window. Those committee recommendations that are made are provided to the board for the action at the December board meeting every year. These are some possible conditions that the board may or may not include in the approval of an incorrect data appeal. The board may direct the school to file a 15915 form with ADE School Finance to correct the data. This is really so that the data doesn't continue to present any issues with the ADEF accountability system. The board may also direct the school to any resources and or workshops on reviewing accountability data. Sean has done a great job of documenting ways to really investigate the static file, to really dig into any issues, and adding extra columns that have been very supportive of schools. The board may also require an attestation that states the schools did not appropriately check the data in that static file validation period, but they will in the future. And this is also where those resources and training would be provided, contact information if you have any questions, and how to really engage in that work in the future. Sean, is there anything else that you would like to add to this?
Just appreciation for the work that you all do as well in making the process about providing accurate data and support for the future. So we appreciate that on our side as well.
Awesome. These are some of the reasons why an incorrect data appeal would not be evaluated by the ADEF Appeals Committee. The first one here is the opposition to the accountability formula. This would be the indicators that are included or their weights in the indicators, as well as those underlying business rules that calculate that data for those indicators. There are steps and processes that are used to change the accountability formula or change the business rules. The way that this would be done is to get a hold of the board's accountability technical advisory committees. That would typically look like contacting me. And so my contact information will be provided as well. And then I would see if that is something we can put onto the agenda to continue to review, because as Sean said, we don't really know all the issues that might be impacting certain types of schools until that issue is really brought up to those technical advisory committees and then decided on by the board to include in any revisions to the ADEF accountability formula or the business rules. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to that part, Sean?
No, just agreement with what you said on we definitely welcome input to the process on the business rules through the technical advisory committee avenue, and these incorrect data appeals. The appeals process is more about reconciling the data, just with being cautious so that we don't upset the system in that moment when letter grades are corrected and have unintended consequences for other schools. So as you mentioned, like we look at changes to the business rules more through the technical advisory committee where we can do analysis and project. And this is more about reconciling differences or where there might be data points that are out of sync. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. The effort and reason for that is to really make it fair, like you said, so that all schools are really being measured and under the understanding that they're being measured by those business rules. So if there is a change in an appeal that would be approved for incorrect data that is about the business rules, then it could apply to other schools that did not submit that appeal application and may not want to go through that process as well. Any demographic makeup or changes in student population. So this would be a sort of student mobility thing, whether that is fewer EL students one year than previous years, or more or less students in special education, less general education classrooms. And then as stated earlier, those incorrect data that does not make an impact in the school's letter grade. These are some of the questions that ADEF Appeals Committee members may ask and consider as they're looking at the incorrect data appeals. The first would be, is it related to the school and student performance? Is the issue outside of the school's control, or has the school taken those reasonable steps to minimize the impact on accountability outcomes? This usually just looks like shooting that email, as Sean said, to the achieve@az.gov inbox, bringing it to the board for the Accountability Technical Advisory Committee to study with the business rules or the accountability formula, filing that 15915 form with school finance prior to that letter grade release. And then finally, again, is there an impact on the letter grade? So we want to share a little bit about a example of what an incorrect data would appeal. This is not a specific school that submitted an appeal. In this example, there are 3 students in special education that are not in the static file. One SPED report shows these students, however, another SPED report does not. And the school was told that there could be no corrections made to that SPED report, which is where that accountability data is being pulled from during that static file review window. The supporting documents that a school might submit with that appeal application are the SACE IDs for those students not included, any documentation of their IP status, like that they're on an IEP, the SPED report that does show all of those students included,
and any communications that they might have about them being told that no corrections could be made. Would you like to add something to this slide, Sean?
This is, I think, a great example of what we spoke about earlier, where in this particular case, it highlighted, with a few reports, it highlighted something that was happening in some of our source data that we were able to chase back down to the root, find a fix, and we had time prior to the release of letter grades to implement it, and it ended up affecting positively a great number of schools. I think in terms of letter grades, it affected maybe a dozen or so, which is a small percentage of the overall, but I think that highlights the approach that we take, and I think I can speak for board staff as well, that we want to make sure that in these situations, we're doing our due diligence, even if it's a small or what may seem like a small impact to the system. Our pursuit is always going to be to have accuracy to the extent that possible. And this one was one where we could implement the fix in time for that year's letter grades and make the changes. There may be data situations that are going to be a more significant project to fix, and they might have to have a fix later, but just the ability to even confirm, like, hey, this is affecting it, and we can do some work by hand to say, like, here we see where this error is, that helps the appeals, and then can have positive impacts either immediately or down the road on the system. So this is a great example.
Yeah, thank you so much for pointing out that sometimes it can't be fixed prior to that letter grade release, and that's where these appeals do become the process to rectify that data. And then if we do see a school that has submitted this appeal, but we know that it's affecting those other 11 or 12 schools, as you said, board staff and the department can also do that outreach to those schools and ask if they can submit an appeal to consider that change when it does make a difference, but that it can't be fixed in the code prior to that letter grade release. Love that. We're going to share like some specific examples. This one is an alternative school. We found some exemplars from previous appeal application windows and reviews, and sought permission from the schools to share these. This first one is about the academic persistence report, where that report showed different information than the A to F summary data from which the letter grade was calculated. ADE verified the results of that academic persistence report, and the change did make an impact on the letter grade. The overall outcome of the ADF Appeals Committee and the board's action was to approve this appeal. So now I'm sharing the appeal application that was submitted for that example. This is one field in the application, which is the appeal factor 1 description. This is what we call the narrative about the appeal and the reason for the appeal. This is what the school wrote here that I've highlighted in the blue. They wrote what the rate was, where they found the information, how many students were affected, and where that isn't matching in the A to F summary report, as well as just looking at the business rules that were used to calculate to be sure that they're calculating it in the right way, and then documenting how many points that changed their letter grade. And that really supports us as we're getting documentation ready for the ADF Appeals Committee to review. Is there anything else that you'd like to add about this specific appeal example, Sean?
I appreciate what you highlighted, that this appeal gave us real precise information that helped us recreate exactly what they're seeing. They were able to mention specific student IDs and their calculations, so we could recreate that and follow through with it.
Awesome, thank you. The next example that we have is a K-8 school regarding their assessment data. There were 4 students that were missing in the A to F calculation. The inclusion of the students' student growth percentiles in the calculation resulted in an increase in the growth points earned, which did make an impact on the letter grade. The department was able to verify the SGPs for those 4 students and the application of the business rules for the inclusion of those students in that growth calculation. The supporting documents that the school submitted for this appeal application are those SACE IDs for the students not included, documentation of what their scale score was, performance levels, and the SGP for the test administrations. For this outcome, the board approved the appeal. The ADEF Appeals Committee made the recommendation to approve, and the board took the action on it. They were also directed to file a 15915 form, because if those student growth percentiles not included one year, they would not follow through into the future and be recognized in future growth calculations, which is very important. This was that supporting documentation that K-8 school submitted. Very detailed documentation. I'm going to let Sean speak a little bit more about what is really necessary from the appeal documentation and what might be just an overburden on the schools and isn't necessary as they're trying to recreate that issue.
I think you described it exactly right, Jessica. I think the only concern here is with the level of detail. This is several pages that can represent many hours of work, and so we hope that the message and the understanding to the field is that we'll take every submission seriously. We'll thoroughly investigate, and the evidence that's needed is really just that precise evidence that helps us recreate the situation and come to those same numbers. We hope that no one ever feels they have to prove the merits of their claim or make a case for why it should be investigated. We're going to take anything, no matter how seemingly small, seriously. We'll investigate. We are committed to producing accurate data, and so we would hope that anyone who's going through the appeals process approaches it with that understanding that the evidence needed raises only to the standard of making sure that everyone can, I like the word you used earlier in our conversation, Jessica, but understand and learn, and that we can recreate it so that we can get to the same route. And we can sometimes follow up with, if there's additional information that's needed, but a lot of times it's really just focusing on, here's the specific student ID numbers, here's the calculation I come up with, and here's maybe some, this is a perfect example. We had these 4 students who aren't appearing. That's perfect. We can confirm those. I remember a case similar to this one where we were able to go back and see, oh, yep, there were some tests that had come in late to the vendor and then missed the initial calculation that had happened the previous year. So we were able to kind of recreate the math on those calculations, get them included and put in. So that would be kind of the standard that's needed, is what's the information that's required so that we can recreate it, understand the concern, and then have the information that we need to follow up and confirm and validate it.
Absolutely. And I would echo that, as well as, putting the utmost faith and trust into schools and that they're representing everything appropriately. And then the department just needs to recreate that, so that bare minimum information of maybe here's what their performance levels were, and then here's where they grew to. And so that would document that change into that growth percentile very well. So thank you for listening to everything that we shared today about incorrect data appeals. I know it was pretty lengthy, but we wanted to give as much insight into the ADEF appeals process with the board and department for incorrect data appeals as possible, to just disillusion that it's this black box where, there's some nefarious things going on. We're really there to support all of the schools' information being as accurate as possible in that letter grade release, so that when it's being interpreted and used in the field, it's representing what's actually happening within the school. So this is our contact information to reach out. Arizona Department of Education shared theirs earlier. The Achieve inbox, the phone number less frequently used for documenting these types of issues, especially helps because you can go then and search your email for that previous communication and start to follow those threads. With the State Board of Education, email is also preferred for those communications, because there are multiple people monitoring that, and you're going to get a quicker response as well from us by using that. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for being here, Sean.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you for your work on this.